The ocean waves of Thessera Prime glowed with soft blue light as the sun set over the crystalline cities. Commander Hay stood on the orbital defense platform, watching her homeworld spin below. She had served in the Velkari defense fleet for 30 years, and in all that time she had never fired a weapon in anger. Her people did not know war. They did not understand violence. Their greatest weapons were designed to disable, never to kill. That peaceful existence ended the day the Ravagers arrived. The first sign was the disappearance of the outer monitoring stations. One moment they were transmitting data, the next moment there was only silence. Hay ordered scout ships to investigate. None of them returned. Then the scanners picked up the swarm. Thousands of ships moving together like a school of fish heading straight for Thessera Prime. The Velkari Council met in emergency session. They sent diplomatic messages to the approaching fleet. They offered trade, knowledge, and friendship. The Ravagers did not respond. They simply came closer and closer and closer. When the swarm reached orbital space, they attacked without warning. The Velkari defense platforms fired their disabling beams, designed to shut down ship systems without causing harm. The beams struck the Ravager vessels and did nothing. The Ravagers returned fire with weapons that tore through shields like paper. Within hours, half the orbital defenses were destroyed. Within a day, the Velkari fleet was scattered and broken. Hay watched from her command chair as the Ravagers descended to the planet's surface. Their landing craft looked like massive insects, all sharp edges and grinding machinery. They landed in the capital city and began to tear apart the buildings, processing everything into raw materials. The Velkari people ran. They had nowhere to go. In the Grand Archive, Scholar Day worked frantically to save the knowledge of 1,000 worlds. The archive was the pride of Velkari civilization, a vast library containing information from every species they had ever met. Day and his team copied files onto portable drives, trying to preserve what they could before the Ravagers reached them. The emergency sirens wailed. Citizens fled to the underground shelters that had been built for natural disasters, never for war. Families huddled together in the darkness, listening to the sounds of destruction above. The Ravagers moved through the city, their machines grinding and crushing everything in their path. Hay evacuated to the command bunker beneath the planet's surface. From there, she watched her world die on the monitors. City after city fell. The Ravagers were methodical, efficient, and utterly merciless. They did not negotiate. They did not take prisoners. They simply consumed. The Velkari Council sent a distress signal to the Galactic Assembly. They were members in good standing. They had followed every law, paid every tribute, attended every conference. Surely the Assembly would help them. Surely their fellow civilized species would not abandon them. The response came 3 days later. A formal message from the Assembly Council expressed deep concern and profound sadness. They offered thoughts and prayers. They would accept Velkari refugees at processing centers. They would provide humanitarian aid to survivors. But they could not send military assistance. The Ravagers were too dangerous. The risk was too great. They were sorry. Thessera Prime was lost. Hay read the message and felt something break inside her. She had believed in the Assembly. She had believed in the community of civilized worlds. But when her people needed help, when they were dying, the Assembly offered only words. Day came to the bunker with a datapad in his hands. His crystalline form flickered with agitation. He had found something in the restricted files of the archive, something the Assembly did not want widely known. Information about a species that existed outside the normal galactic community. A species that had been quarantined, isolated, deemed too dangerous for civilized space. Humanity. The files told a disturbing story. 40 years ago, 3 Assembly members had tried to claim a small colony in what they thought was unclaimed space. The colony belonged to a species called humans. The Assembly members demanded the humans leave. The humans refused. War followed. The 3 Assembly members had expected an easy victory over a primitive species. Instead, humanity fought with a ferocity and creativity that shocked the galaxy. They won. They drove the invaders from their space and demanded to be left alone. The Assembly agreed, but only because they were afraid. They quarantined human space and forbade contact. The official record said humanity was volatile, unpredictable, and dangerous. The hidden record said something else. They said humanity fought with honor. They said humans valued freedom above all else. They said that when cornered, humans did not surrender. They fought until they won or until they died. Day looked at Commander Hay. His voice was quiet but firm. The Assembly would not save them. The Assembly had already abandoned them. But there was one species that might help if they were willing to ask. Hay stared at the data about humanity. Everything she had been taught said they were dangerous. Everything she had believed said civilized species solved problems with words, not violence. But her people were dying. Her world was burning, and the civilized species had offered nothing but sympathy. She made her decision. Without the Council's permission, without Assembly approval, Hay and Day composed a message. They included footage of the Ravager attacks. They included images of Velkari children hiding in shelters. They included a simple plea: we are dying. The Assembly calls you dangerous. Please be dangerous for us. They broadcast the message on all frequencies toward human space. They did not know if anyone would receive it. They did not know if humans would care about aliens they had never met. They only knew that sitting in the darkness waiting to die was not acceptable. The message traveled through space at the speed of light. Down in the shelters, Velkari families held each other and prayed. On the surface, the Ravagers continued their systematic destruction. In the command bunker, Hay watched the stars and waited. She did not have much hope. But hope was all she had left. 3 days passed. Then on every frequency, a response came. The message was brief. It was in rough but understandable Velkari language. It said, "We received your call. We are coming." Hold on, Hay stared at the message. She read it again. And again. Across the bunker, Dee began to laugh. It was not happy laughter. It was the sound of someone who had given up on everything, suddenly finding a reason to believe. Commander Hay sent a response. "How many ships are you sending? How long until you arrive?" The answer came back: enough ships. 48 hours. Prepare your people. When we arrive, stay in the shelters. It will not be gentle. Hay broadcast the news to all the remaining Velkari. Help was coming. Strange help, from a species they had been told to fear, but help nonetheless. In the shelters, families wept with relief. On the surface, the Ravagers continued their work, unaware that they had made a terrible mistake. They had hurt someone, and that someone had asked humanity for help. The storm was coming. The message reached Earth's Outer Rim station at 0600 hours Standard Time. Admiral Jin was drinking his morning coffee when Lieutenant Wu burst into his office with a data pad. The young officer's face was pale. He played the Velkari distress call without saying a word. Jin watched the footage in silence. He saw the crystalline cities burning. He saw the Ravagers tearing through orbital defenses. He saw families running, children crying, a civilization dying. And he heard the final plea: "Be dangerous for us." Jin set down his coffee. His hand was steady, but his jaw was tight. He called an immediate meeting of his senior staff. Within 20 minutes, every captain and major officer in the fleet was assembled in the briefing room. Captain Rin arrived first. She commanded the carrier Indomitable, the largest ship in the expeditionary fleet. She watched the Velkari message twice, then looked at Jin with fire in her eyes. Major Tay came next, the commander of the 77th Shock Division. His Marines were stationed on the fleet's troop carriers, ready for deployment but with nowhere to deploy. He watched the message once and immediately began calculating troop numbers. Dr. Young, the fleet's chief xenobiologist, arrived last. She was a civilian contractor, not military, but Jin valued her insight. She watched the message and immediately pulled up everything the database had on the Velkari. Peaceful species, advanced science, no military tradition, pacifists who had never hurt anyone. The room fell silent when the message ended. Jin let the silence stretch. He wanted them to think, to consider, to understand what he was about to propose. Lieutenant Wu spoke first. He pulled up a star chart showing the Galactic Assembly territory. The Sarah Prime was deep inside assembly space, well beyond the quarantine line that separated humanity from the rest of the galaxy. Going there would be a clear violation of the treaty. The assembly had made it very clear: humanity was to stay in their own space. No contact, no interference, no exceptions. As if on cue, an official message arrived from the assembly. It was addressed to Earth Command and copied to every human outpost. The message was formal and cold. The assembly was aware that the Velkari had sent an unauthorized communication to humanity. Humanity was reminded of the quarantine agreement. Any attempt to cross into assembly space would be considered an act of war. The situation on Thesara Prime was an internal matter. Humanity was to ignore the distress call. Captain Rin stood up. Her voice was calm, but her words were sharp. She pointed out that humanity had not asked for the quarantine. The Assembly had imposed it after humanity won a war that the Assembly had started. The Assembly had attacked human colonies, and humanity had defended itself. Winning was apparently a crime in the Assembly's eyes. Now the Assembly was letting innocent people die rather than risk their political comfort. Major Tay added his thoughts. His Marines had trained for years with no real mission. They were volunteers, every one of them. They had joined to protect people. The Velkari were people. They needed protection. The math was simple. Dr. Young provided the practical analysis. The Velkari were physically fragile. They could not fight the Ravagers. Their biology was based on crystalline structures that the Ravagers could easily process. Without help, the Velkari would be extinct within weeks. The Ravagers were a known threat, a nomadic swarm that had consumed dozens of worlds. The Assembly had never stopped them because the Assembly preferred to retreat rather than fight. Jin listened to all of them. Then he made his decision. He ordered the fleet to prepare for immediate deployment. They would go to Thesara Prime. They would engage the Ravagers. They would save the Velkari or die trying. Lieutenant Wu pointed out that Earth Command had not authorized this action.
Jin smiled.
It was not a happy smile. He said that he would send Earth Command a message explaining his decision. They could court-martial him when he returned. If he returned, the message Jin sent to Earth Command was brief. A peaceful species is being exterminated. They asked us for help specifically. The Assembly refuses to act. We will not refuse. I take full responsibility for this decision. If it costs me my career, so be it. Some things are more important than regulations. Earth Command's response came 6 hours later. The message was from Admiral Park, the overall commander of Earth's defense forces. Park was old school, a veteran of the Assembly War. His message was even more brief than Jin's. Approved. Show them what we stand for. Give them hell. The fleet began preparations immediately. 3 heavy carriers, 12 destroyers, and the experimental ship Tempest prepared for faster-than-light travel. The Tempest was Commander Na's ship, a vessel designed for atmospheric combat. It was untested in real battle conditions. Na did not care. She volunteered immediately. The Marines loaded their equipment. Major Tay briefed his troops on what little was known about the Ravagers. The enemy was biomechanical, meaning part organic and part machine. They were strong, tough, and worked as a coordinated swarm. Standard energy weapons had limited effect. Tay's solution was simple. Bring more kinetic weapons. Bring explosives. Bring everything. Dr. Young prepared medical facilities for Velkari physiology. She had never treated a crystalline life form before, but she studied fast. She also prepared battlefield analysis equipment. Understanding the Ravagers might be the key to defeating them. Captain Rin walked through her ship speaking to her crew. The Indomitable carried over 2,000 personnel. Everyone knew this mission was unauthorized. Everyone knew they were potentially starting a war with the Assembly. Rin asked each section for a vote, stay or go. Every single crew member voted to go. 48 hours after receiving the Velkari message, the Terran Expeditionary Fleet entered faster-than-light travel. They accelerated to maximum speed, racing across the galaxy toward a world they had never seen to save a species they had never met. The journey took 3 days. During that time, Jin received multiple messages from the Assembly. Each message was more threatening than the last. The Assembly demanded the fleet turn back. They warned of severe consequences. They threatened military action. They reminded humanity of their quarantine status. Jin deleted each message without responding. The time for words had passed. On the final day of travel, Jin gathered his officers one last time. He laid out the battle plan. The fleet would drop out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Thesara system. They would assess the Ravager positions. Then they would attack with maximum force. The goal was not just to drive the Ravagers away. The goal was to make them understand that attacking the weak had consequences. Captain Rin asked about rules of engagement. Jin's answer was simple. Protect the Velkari. Destroy any Ravager that threatens them. Do not stop until the threat is eliminated. Major Tay asked about extraction plans if the battle went wrong. Jin looked at him steadily. There was no extraction plan. They would win, or they would die on Thesara Prime. There was no middle option. Commander Na asked about the Tempest's role.
Jin smiled.
The Tempest would do what it was designed to do: drop into the atmosphere and become a flying fortress. The Velkari needed protection. The Tempest would provide it. The fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel right on schedule. The Thesara system appeared on their screens. They could see the Ravager swarm immediately. Hundreds of ships in orbit, thousands of ground units on the planet's surface. The Velkari defense fleet was gone. The orbital platforms were destroyed. The planet was dying. Jin stood on the bridge of his flagship and gave the order. All ships, battle speed. Lock weapons. Engage at will. The Terran fleet accelerated into the system like a hammer. The Ravagers turned to face this new threat. They had never seen human ships before. They had never fought humans before. They were about to learn what happened when humanity answered a call for help. On Thesara Prime, in the underground bunkers, Commander Hay received a message. "We have arrived. Stay down. This will be loud." The Velkari people held each other in the darkness and waited. Above them, the storm had arrived. The Ravagers had conquered 47 worlds. They had faced dozens of species, hundreds of different weapons, thousands of ships. They had learned to adapt to energy weapons, particle beams, plasma cannons, and graviton pulses. They had optimized their armor and shields for every known threat in the galaxy. They had never faced humanity. The human fleet did not slow down as it approached the Ravager swarm. In every battle the Ravagers had fought before, enemy fleets maintained distance, firing long-range weapons while maneuvering for advantage. That was how civilized species fought. That was what the Galactic Assembly taught as proper space warfare. Admiral Jin's fleet did the opposite. They accelerated directly into the Ravager formation at full combat speed. The Ravagers barely had time to react before the human destroyers were among them, firing at point-blank range. The humans did not use energy weapons as their primary armament. They used kinetic weapons, railguns that fired solid metal slugs at incredible speeds. The slugs punched through Ravager shields like they were not there. They tore through armor plating and shredded the biomechanical systems inside. Ravager ships that had survived concentrated energy weapon fire for hours died in seconds to human railgun barrages. The Ravagers tried to adapt their tactics. They surrounded individual human ships, attempting to overwhelm them with numbers. The human ships activated point defense systems that the Ravagers had not anticipated. Automated guns tracked and destroyed incoming projectiles and small craft with ruthless efficiency. Human ships that took damage did not retreat. They kept fighting, kept firing, kept pushing forward. Captain Rin commanded from the bridge of the Indomitable. Her carrier was the largest target in the fleet, and the Ravagers focused their fire on it. The shields took hit after hit, flaring with each impact. Rin did not order evasive maneuvers. Instead, she ordered her fighter wings to launch. Hundreds of small human craft poured out of the carrier's bays, swarming over the Ravager ships like angry wasps. The fighters were fast and aggressive. They did not try to destroy Ravager ships alone. Instead, they worked in teams, targeting engines and weapon systems, crippling the larger vessels so the destroyers could finish them. It was coordinated chaos, and the Ravagers had no response for it. While the fleet engaged in orbit, the Tempest made its approach to the planet. Commander Na sat in the pilot's chair, watching her screens as the atmospheric entry window approached. The Tempest was an experimental design, a warship built to operate in atmosphere as easily as in space. It had never been tested in real combat. I was about to test it thoroughly. She took the Tempest into the atmosphere at full combat burn. The ship shuddered and roared as it hit the air at impossible speeds. Heat shields glowed red. The hull groaned under the stress. Na held the controls steady and brought the ship down over the largest remaining Velkari city. The Ravagers on the ground had been systematically destroying the city for days. Their massive processing machines were tearing apart buildings and converting them to raw materials. Ravager ground troops patrolled the streets, hunting for any remaining Velkari civilians. They looked up when the Tempest descended from the sky like a falling star. The Tempest's weapons batteries opened fire while still airborne. Railgun rounds, missiles, and autocannon fire rained down on the Ravager positions. The processing machines exploded. The ground troops scattered. now brought the ship into a stable hover above the city center, and the Tempest became a flying fortress, its weapons covering every approach to the civilian shelters. Below ground, Commander Hay watched on the monitors in disbelief. The Valkyrie had sophisticated sensors, and she could see everything happening on the surface. She saw the human ship hovering in the air, defying gravity and common sense. She saw the weapons fire that never seemed to stop. She saw Ravagers dying by the hundreds. Then the drop pods began to fall. They came from the fleet in orbit, dozens of them. Small armored capsules that plummeted through the atmosphere like meteors. They slammed into the city streets with impacts that cracked pavement and shook buildings. The pods opened, and armored figures emerged. Major Tay was in the first pod to land. He stepped out into a city street filled with smoke and fire. His Marines fanned out around him, weapons ready. Each Marine wore powered armor that increased their strength and protected them from most weapons. They carried rifles that used chemical propellants to fire solid bullets. To a galaxy that used energy weapons, it looked primitive. It was incredibly effective. A Ravager ground unit spotted them and charged. The creature was massive, 3 meters tall, with armor plating and blade-like limbs. It could tear through steel. It had killed Valkyrie soldiers by the dozens. Major Tay raised his rifle and fired a 3-round burst into the creature's center mass. The armor-piercing rounds punched through the Ravager's plating and shredded its internal systems. The creature collapsed mid-charge and did not move again. More Ravagers appeared, drawn by the sound of gunfire. The Marines formed a defensive line and opened fire. The sound was deafening in the enclosed city streets. Bullets tore through Ravager armor. Grenades exploded in clusters of enemy troops. When the Ravagers got too close, the Marines drew combat knives and fought hand-to-hand with an aggression that shocked their enemy. The Ravagers had never encountered a species that chose to fight at close range. Most civilized species tried to maintain distance, using technology to keep themselves safe from danger. Humans ran toward danger. They sought it out. They embraced it. More drop pods landed throughout the city. Marine squads established defensive perimeters around every shelter entrance. Major Tay coordinated the defense, directing units to where they were needed most. The Ravagers threw more and more troops at the human positions, but the Marines held their ground. In one critical moment, a Ravager breakthrough threatened to overrun the main shelter entrance. 50 Ravager troops were charging the position, and the Marine squad there was running low on ammunition. Major Tay led a relief force personally. When they arrived, he gave a simple order: fix bayonets. The Marines attached long blades to their rifles. Then they charged into the Ravager formation. The Valkyrie watching on monitors could not believe what they were seeing. These soft, small humans were attacking creatures twice their size with nothing but blades and fury. But the humans were not small when they wore their powered armor, and they were not soft when they refused to yield. The battle lasted 18 hours without pause. Human ships in orbit continued to destroy Ravager vessels. The Tempest maintained its position over the city, its weapons never silent. The Marines on the ground fought block by block, building by building, refusing to give up a single meter of ground. Dr. Young set up a field hospital near the main shelter. When the first wounded Marines were brought in, she treated them as best she could. Then Valkyrie civilians began emerging from the shelters wanting to help. Young showed them how to bandage wounds, how to carry stretchers, how to comfort the injured. The Valkyrie were pacifists, but they could still serve. Scholar Day came to the surface during a lull in the fighting. He walked through the human defensive lines, seeing the Marines at their positions. Many of them were wounded but refused medical evacuation. They stayed at their posts, protecting the people who had asked for their help. Day approached Major Tay and asked a simple question: why? Tay looked at him. The Major's armor was scorched and dented. Blood stained his uniform where shrapnel had penetrated the armor joints. But his eyes were clear and steady. He said that a long time ago humanity had needed help. Some of them had called out and no one had answered. Humanity had learned from that. They had decided that when someone called for help, humanity would answer. It did not matter if they were human or alien. It did not matter if it was convenient or profitable. Someone asked for help. That was enough. By the end of the first day, the Ravagers had lost 40% of their ground forces and a quarter of their orbital fleet. They had never retreated from a battle before. They had never needed to. But the human defenders were not breaking. The human fleet was not withdrawing. And the Ravagers were dying faster than they could replace their losses. For the first time in their existence, the Ravagers pulled back. They retreated to their landing zones and consolidated their forces. In the underground bunkers, the Velkari people wept with relief and wonder. On the surface, the human Marines reloaded their weapons and prepared for the next wave. In orbit, Admiral Jin watched the tactical displays and knew the real battle was yet to come. The Ravagers were calling for reinforcements. The storm had arrived, but the storm was about to get much worse. The Ravager swarm mind had existed for thousands of years. It had consumed hundreds of worlds, absorbed countless species grown stronger with each conquest. It operated on a simple principle: consume, adapt, expand. Nothing had ever stopped it. Nothing had ever hurt it badly enough to matter. Humanity was hurting it. The swarm mind analyzed the battle data from Thesara Prime. The humans fought in ways that made no logical sense. They risked their own lives to protect others. They used primitive kinetic weapons instead of sophisticated energy systems. They charged into close combat when any rational species would maintain distance. Nothing about human tactics fit the patterns the swarm mind had learned from conquering the galaxy. The swarm mind made its decision. If these humans wanted a war, the swarm would give them extinction. It called every Ravager ship within 6 systems to converge on Thesara Prime. What had been a harvesting operation would become a complete extermination. The humans would die. The Velkari would die. Everything on this world would be consumed. Admiral Jin saw the reinforcements coming on his long-range scanners. The numbers made his blood run cold. Hundreds of additional Ravager ships were entering the system. His fleet was already damaged from the first engagement. They were outnumbered 3-1. Soon it would be 10-1, then 20-1. He called his senior officers to a secure channel. Captain Rin, Commander Na, Major Tay, Dr. Young, and Lieutenant Wu all joined the conference. Jin did not hide the truth from them. They were going to lose. The Ravagers had numbers they could not match. The fleet could retreat now, evacuate some Velkari civilians and claim a partial victory, or they could stay and die. There was a long silence on the channel. Then Captain Rin spoke. She pointed out that they had not come here for a partial victory. They had come to save the Velkari. Running away would just delay the inevitable. The Ravagers would finish what they started. Major Tay agreed. His Marines were dug in on the surface. They were not leaving. If the fleet retreated, the ground forces would fight until the end. They had given their word to protect these people. Commander Na said that the Tempest was not going anywhere. She had positioned her ship to cover the civilians. That was where she would stay. Dr. Young said something that made everyone pause. She had been studying the Ravagers constantly since the battle began. She had analyzed their communications, their movements, their tactics. She had discovered something important. The Ravagers were not individuals. They were a hive mind, all connected to a central intelligence. Every Ravager unit was part of a larger whole, controlled by a massive hive ship that was now entering the system. Lieutenant Wu had detected the same thing. The hive ship was huge, 10 times larger than any other Ravager vessel. It was staying at the edge of the system, coordinating the swarm from a safe distance. If they could destroy the hive ship, they might disrupt the entire Ravager force. Jin understood immediately. It was a suicide mission. The hive ship would be protected by hundreds of smaller vessels. A single ship trying to reach it would be destroyed long before getting close. Captain Rin volunteered before Jin could ask. She would take the Indomitable, load it with every nuclear warhead in the fleet, and ram it directly into the hive ship. Her crew would evacuate first. She would pilot the ship alone on its final mission. Dr. Young stopped her. There was another way, possibly. Scholar Day had shared the Velkari's research with her. The Velkari were crystalline life forms, and their natural biology disrupted quantum entanglement. The Ravagers used quantum entanglement to maintain their hive connection. If they could weaponize the Velkari's biological properties, they could sever the Ravagers from their hive ship without destroying it. Without the hive connection, the individual Ravagers would become mindless drones. It was a desperate plan. It required getting close enough to the hive ship to deploy the resonance weapons. It required those weapons to actually work. It required perfect timing and a lot of luck. Jin looked at the odds. They were terrible, but they were better than the alternative. He gave the orders. Dr. Young would work with Scholar Day to create the resonance weapons. Commander Na would take the Tempest on the attack run. The ship was fast, maneuverable, and could take tremendous damage. If any ship could reach the hive ship, it was the Tempest. The rest of the fleet would create a diversion, drawing as many Ravagers away from the hive ship as possible. Major Tay and his Marines would hold the planet's surface. No matter what happened in space, they would protect the Velkari shelters. The civilians would survive even if no one else did. The preparations took 12 hours. Dr. Young and Day worked without sleep, converting Velkari medical equipment into weapons. The resonance devices were crude, untested, and might not work at all. But they were the only hope. Commander Na prepared the Tempest for the mission. She stripped out everything non-essential to make the ship faster. She routed all power to engines and shields. Her crew wanted to stay with her, but she ordered them to evacuate to the other ships. This was a one-way trip. She would fly it alone. Captain Rin prepared the fleet for the diversion. Every ship would push their engines to maximum. They would draw fire, take damage, make the Ravagers focus on them instead of the Tempest. It would cost lives. It would cost ships. But it would give Na her chance. On the planet's surface, the Ravagers launched their renewed assault. Thousands of ground troops attacked the human positions simultaneously. Major Tay's Marines faced overwhelming numbers. They fell back to secondary positions, then tertiary positions, each fighting retreat planned to make the Ravagers pay in blood for every meter. A Marine squad was surrounded in the ruins of a Velkari school. They were out of ammunition and down to combat knives. The Ravagers closed in for the kill. Then Velkari civilians emerged from a nearby shelter. They threw rocks. They had no weapons, no training, no way to actually hurt the Ravagers. But they distracted them long enough for another Marine squad to arrive with heavy weapons. The surrounded Marines were saved. Commander Hay watched this moment on her monitors. Her pacifist people were fighting, not with weapons because they had none, but with courage, because the humans had shown them what courage looked like. The space battle began when the Ravager reinforcements were fully committed. The human fleet charged directly at the largest concentration of enemy ships. Railguns fired until the barrels overheated. Missiles launched in continuous streams. Ships took damage and kept fighting. The Ravagers threw everything at them, just as Jin had planned. While the main battle raged, Commander Na took the Tempest on its run toward the hive ship. She flew low and fast, using the planet's gravity to slingshot around and gain speed. Ravager ships pursued her, firing constantly. The Tempest's shields failed within minutes. Armor plating melted under sustained energy weapon fire. Na kept flying. She talked to herself as she flew, a running commentary on the damage reports scrolling across her screens. Hull breach in Section 4. Engines at 70%. Weapons offline. Still flying. Still going. Not dead yet. The Tempest took hits that should have destroyed it. Explosions tore through internal compartments. Systems failed one after another. Na rerouted power, shut down damaged sections, and kept the ship moving forward. She could see the hive ship ahead, massive and terrible, surrounded by a defensive screen of smaller vessels. The Tempest hit that defensive screen like a missile. Na did not try to avoid the enemy ships. She flew through them, ramming smaller vessels aside, taking damage from every angle. The ship was falling apart around her. Fire suppression systems failed. Life support was offline. Na flew in her pressure suit, breathing bottled air, guiding a dying ship toward its target. She reached the hive ship. For a moment, Na thought she would not survive long enough to deploy the weapons. Then she remembered why she was here. Remembered the Velkari families in their shelters. Remembered that someone had asked humanity for help. She armed the resonance weapons and launched them directly into the hive ship's hull. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Na prepared to die, hoping the weapons would activate after she was gone. Then the resonance wave hit. It was invisible, inaudible, but every sensor on every ship detected it. The wave spread from the hive ship in all directions, passing through the Ravager swarm like a ghost. Across the entire system, every Ravager unit stopped moving. Ships drifted in space. Ground troops collapsed where they stood. The hive connection was severed. The swarm mind was gone. What remained were thousands of individual drones with no intelligence, no coordination, no purpose. The battle ended not with explosions, but with silence. The human fleet stopped firing. On the planet's surface, the Marines lowered their weapons and stared at the motionless Ravager troops. In the Tempest, Commander Na sat in her pilot's chair, breathing hard, unable to believe she was still alive. Admiral Jin's voice came over the fleet-wide channel. Cease fire. The threat is neutralized. All units begin damage assessment and recovery operations. On Thesera Prime in the underground shelters, Commander Hayes stood up slowly. She walked to the shelter entrance, climbed the stairs to the surface, and emerged into daylight. The city was in ruins. Fires burned everywhere, but the Ravagers were gone, defeated, driven away. The morning sun rose over Thesera Prime, painting the ruins in shades of gold and orange. Commander Hayes stood in what had been the capital city's central square and tried to count the cost. Half the city was destroyed. The orbital defenses were gone. Thousands of Velkari had died, but millions had survived. Her species had a future, when 3 days ago they had faced extinction. The human ships remained in orbit, their crews working around the clock to make repairs. The Indomitable had lost 2 engines and would never fly at full speed again. 3 destroyers were total losses, their crews evacuated before the ships broke apart. The Tempest hung in orbit like a broken toy, held together by emergency force fields and prayers. Commander Na had survived, but her ship would need to be completely rebuilt. On the ground, the human Marines had set up a temporary base near the main shelter complex. Medical tents dotted the landscape. Dr. Young and her team worked alongside Velkari doctors, treating wounded from both species. The Velkari had never performed surgery under combat conditions. Young taught them quickly, and they learned faster than she expected. Major Tay walked through the Marine encampment checking on his troops. Casualty reports showed over 2,000 killed or wounded. That was nearly a third of his force. Each name on the list felt like a weight on his shoulders. They had come here to save lives. They had succeeded, but the price had been high. Scholar Day found Tay near the command tent. The Velkari carried a datapad with him, as always. He wanted to show the Major something. It was a message from the Galactic Assembly. The Assembly was furious. They accused humanity of violating the quarantine, of unprovoked aggression, of interfering in internal affairs. They demanded the immediate withdrawal of all human forces. They threatened sanctions, military action, and complete isolation. Tay read the message and handed the datapad back. He asked Day what the Velkari government planned to say in response. Day's crystalline form flickered with something that might have been anger. The Velkari Council was drafting a very specific response. They would tell the Assembly exactly what had happened. The Assembly had abandoned them. Humanity had saved them. If the Assembly wanted to punish someone, they could start by explaining why they let innocent people die. Admiral Jin received the same Assembly message in orbit. He was not surprised. He had expected threats. What he had not expected was the second wave of messages that arrived an hour later. 17 different species, all minor members of the Assembly, all species that had been bullied or ignored by the major powers. They sent private messages to humanity, not asking for military aid, asking for contact, for trade, for cultural exchange, for friendship. They had watched what humanity did. They had seen humans risk everything to save strangers. These smaller species wanted to be the kind of people humanity would help. More than that, they wanted to be allies with a species that actually cared about others. Captain Rin brought these messages to Jin's attention. She pointed out that the political situation was changing. The Assembly's power had always been based on the major species controlling the minor ones through economic and military pressure. But if the minor species started working with humanity instead, the balance of power would shift. The Assembly was scared. That was why they were threatening so aggressively. Jin made a decision. He broadcast a response on all frequencies open for everyone to hear. He stated that humanity had responded to a distress call. They had saved innocent lives. They would do it again if necessary. The Assembly could threaten all they wanted. Humanity would not be intimidated into ignoring people who needed help. Then Jin made an offer. Any species that wanted peaceful contact with humanity was welcome. Trade, cultural exchange, scientific cooperation, all of it was available. Humanity had been isolated long enough. They were ready to rejoin the galactic community, but on their own terms. Not as subordinates to the Assembly, as equals. The Assembly's response came quickly. They offered humanity full membership in the Assembly, with all the privileges and responsibilities that came with it. They would lift the quarantine completely. They would grant humanity access to all Assembly trade networks. All humanity had to do was agree to follow assembly rules and respect assembly authority. Admiral Jin read the offer carefully. Then he declined. He explained that humanity would consider joining the assembly when the assembly became something worth joining. An organization that abandoned its own members in their time of need was not an organization humanity wanted to be part of. Humanity would stay independent. They would make their own alliances, and they would continue to help people who asked for it. On Thesara Prime, the Velkari people emerged from their shelters and began the work of rebuilding. They had no military to speak of. Their economy was shattered. They could not pay humanity for the rescue. Commander Hay met with Admiral Jin to discuss this. She was embarrassed. Her people owed humanity everything, and they had nothing to give in return. Jin surprised her. He said that the Velkari had already paid. They had reached out when they needed help. They had treated humanity as people worth asking, not monsters to fear. That meant more than money or resources. The Velkari had given humanity something precious: trust. Scholar Dai had one gift to offer. He gave humanity complete access to the Grand Archive. The archive contained knowledge from 1,000 civilizations, information that would advance human science by decades or centuries. Day said that knowledge should belong to those who used it wisely. Humanity had proven they could use their strength wisely. They deserved the knowledge. The human fleet prepared to depart after a week of recovery operations. The ships that could still fly were ready. The ships that could not were left in Velkari care for later salvage. Commander Na transferred to another vessel, looking back at her broken Tempest with a mix of sadness and pride. The ship had done its job. It had saved lives. That was enough. Major Tay held a ceremony for the fallen Marines. The Velkari requested to attend. Thousands of them gathered in the ruined city square, along with the surviving Marines. Tay spoke about duty, sacrifice, and the belief that some things were worth dying for. The Velkari listened in silence, many of them weeping. These humans had died for strangers. The Velkari would remember that for the rest of their existence. Commander Hay made a request to the Velkari Council. She wanted to build a monument in the city square. The council approved immediately. Velkari artisans worked day and night to create it. When it was finished, it depicted a human marine in powered armor, carrying a Velkari child to safety. The inscription was in both languages. They cried out for help. Humanity arrived like a storm, and when the storm passed, hope remained. The human fleet departed Thesara Prime to cheers from the Velkari people. As the ships entered faster than light travel, Admiral Jin sat in his command chair and thought about what came next. Earth would want reports. The assembly would continue their threats. Other species would reach out looking for allies. Humanity's isolation was ending, but the future was uncertain. Captain Rin joined him on the bridge. She had been monitoring communications from across the galaxy. A new phrase was spreading among the minor species of the assembly. When they faced problems their own governments would not address, when they needed help that no one would give, they said 3 simple words to each other: call the humans. Back on Thesara Prime, the Velkari got to work rebuilding their civilization. They would never forget what had happened. They would never forget who came when they called. And they would never again believe that the assembly represented the best of what the galaxy could offer. The 77th Shock Division received a new nickname when they returned to Earth. They were now called the Storm Brigade. Major Tay's Marines wore the name with pride. They had arrived like a storm. They had brought hope to the hopeless. And they had proven something important. Humanity's greatest strength was not their weapons or their ships or their technology. It was their willingness to help when help was needed. In the months that followed, the galaxy began to change. Minor species started trading with humanity. Cultural exchanges began. Scientific cooperation grew. The assembly tried to maintain control, but their power was slipping. The fear they had used to control others was losing its effectiveness. Because now there was an alternative. Now there was humanity. Admiral Jin was eventually promoted rather than court-martialed. Earth Command recognized that his decision had changed humanity's position in the galaxy. The quarantine had been meant to isolate humanity. Instead, it had given them time to develop, to grow stronger, to become something the galaxy had never seen before. A species that valued compassion as much as strength. Dr. Young continued her work, studying alien biology and developing better medical treatments. She trained other doctors in techniques for treating non-human species. Humanity was going to be interacting with aliens more and more. They needed to be ready to help them, to heal them, to understand them. Commander Na eventually got a new ship, another experimental design that she tested with the same fearlessness she had shown at the Sarah Prime. She named it the Storm's Eye, in honor of what they had accomplished. Lieutenant Wu became Admiral Jin's chief of staff, helping to coordinate humanity's growing network of alliances and partnerships.